So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first of a 5-part series on the 5 books in 5 weeks. And this is a Torah crash course. And we're going to go through a very brief and quick overview of the entire Torah. But before we do that, it is critically important to understand what the Torah is and what it means to us. Okay? So before we go through each portion and discuss them, I'm going to spend some time explaining and giving an introduction, so to speak, to the Torah. Now, it's a frightening thing to give an introduction to the Torah, because the Torah is not like, some random author writes a book and we're going to talk about the book and it's like we're going to create a book club, This is the manual for life. Now, what type of book is the Torah? Right? One might ask, what type of book is the Torah? So, is it a history book? Is it a story book? Is it a book of laws? Is it a book of commandments? Is it a book of suggestions, recommendations? What type of book is the Torah? I was once talking to someone and we were talking about the 10 Commandments. He says, it's 10 suggestions, right? So, I can't help you if you think it's 10 suggestions. It's 10 commandments. But we're going to talk about what a mitzvah is, what a commandment is, and explain how our relationship grows with the Almighty through each commandment. We'll get to that soon. So the real question is, if the Torah is a book of laws, then just write the laws. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 613 laws, and just write them all down. Right? Rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3, rule number 4. And that's not the way the Torah is constructed. In fact, if you want to see the parsha that has the most mitzvah, or till it gets to more than one mitzvah in a parsha, right? You start off the first commandment of the Torah is be fruitful and multiply. Then we have 2 portions later is to circumcise all males. And then you have, you go 10 portions later or 12 portions later, you have HaChodesh HaZelachem. You should count the months by the Hebrew calendar. We start with Nisan is the first month in the Jewish calendar. And then it goes into the 10 Commandments, and then we start going into laws. But you're talking about 15, 16 weeks of Torah portions that we read till we get to, significant commandments. So it's not a book of laws either. So what is the Torah? The Torah is the master plan of our world and existence. Right? Our sages tell us, Histakla ba'oraisa bara alma. The Almighty first looked at the Torah, and by that created the world. Many times I laugh when I hear this. People say, it's such a coincidence that science and the Torah coincide. It's not a coincidence. The Torah came before science, right? The science is Torah. God looked at the blueprint. I don't know if you've ever been to a work site where they're building a construction site. So there's always one area which is a little bit quieter, and that's the area where they have the blueprints. And they have a table there, and they know here they have to put the beams, and here they have to put the pipes, and here they have to put the wires, and here they have to put the heating and air conditioning ducts, and right, and here you have to put the cable, and over here you have to put the plumbing. Every single thing is mapped out in advance. What comes first? The blueprint. Right? The architect designs, right? They get an engineer to work out all those details, and then they go build it. What is the blueprint of this world that we're living in right now? The blueprint is the Torah. So yes, the Torah was around already before creation. And that's just an interesting idea for us to understand how, we know Abraham observed the Torah. How did he observe the Torah? The Torah wasn't given yet. Well, the Torah precedes the world. Right? So, Abraham can dig into that wisdom. He can dig into that blueprint. Now, I want to address something. I've mentioned this before in different classes, but I think here in this setting, it's important to bring this to our understanding. This idea of commandments. I've heard people tell me, Rabbi, you're telling me kosher is so good for your soul. Kosher is so, I'm online on the internet, so I got to be careful what I say about different vendors, but it's not Manischewitz, okay? That's not kosher, okay? Manischewitz is great. It has its place, but that's not the extent of all kosher, right? Kosher, I'm sure there are people who love that food, right? But there's great food in kosher. But you know what? People complain that it's pricey. It costs more. So let me give you a parallel example. You go and you get a nice raise from, now the tax bill passed, and your company says, you know what? All of our employees are getting a raise. All right? So you get that raise. Great. What are you going to do with it? You're going to go to the BMW dealership, and you're going to buy yourself the ultimate driving machine. So you go into the dealership, and you buy your new BMW, you drive out, and when is the first time you're going to open up that manual that's in the glove compartment? The answer is the first time you need to fill up gas. Because till now you're driving your Camry or your Corolla, right? And you had to fill up the cheapest gas to get you from one place to the other. But now you're driving the ultimate driving experience, right? And if you want to maximize that ultimate driving experience, guess what? You're going to have to buy the premium fuel, the premium gas. So you open up the book, you're like, what type? Oh, I got to pay more. Okay. And then you look, oh my goodness, it's 50 cents more a gallon. That's crazy, right? And then you start saying to yourself, excuse me, who does Mr. BMW think he is to tell me what to put into my car? It's my car. I earned the money. I paid for this, right? And you're telling me what to feed my car with? So what's Mr. BMW going to respond to you? Go right ahead. Put in whatever you want. But if you want to maximize the experience of the ultimate driving machine, guess what? You have to put in premium. It's a luxury experience. It's a luxury car. If you want to maximize from this experience, you got this, who are you to tell me what to do? So what will he tell you? Mr. BMW will say, in a real mean, nasty German accent, he'll say, well, I am the engineer who created this car. I know what's best for it. Okay? God is the engineer of each and every one of us, of the entire world, the entire universe. Everything that exists because God created it. God engineered it. And He's telling us exactly what is needed to maximize the experience. We are living in a world that is seeking one thing: pleasure. We're seeking one thing. By the way, this is both people who are completely materialistic and vain, and this is also people who are spiritual. Both seeking the same thing: pleasure. But the Torah tells us the distinction between authentic pleasure and counterfeit pleasure. Yeah, we can put in different types of fuel, right? We can eat our glatt kosher, we can eat our Whataburger. They both fuel the body, but there's a difference. There's a huge difference in it. And the difference may not be seen from minute to minute. But in the ultimate experience of pleasure, of real pleasure, authentic pleasure, that is seen. And that will be a difference. Just by the way, as a side note, I think the greatest gift to kosher eaters was Whole Foods. And that is because that's the greatest proof that price doesn't matter. right? Anybody who's willing to pay $12 for a box of cereal can pay extra for glatt kosher meat, right? So it's sometimes in our mind. But why is, Whole Foods, the Holy Grail? Because it's healthier for your body. Don't you understand? It's organic, right? There's organic for the soul. Right? Kosher is the example I chose now. But every mitzvah is there as a tool to maximize your experience. If you don't understand how mezuzah maximizes your experience, then we need to learn about mezuzah. Not say, I'm just going to buy any cheap mezuzah to have it. It's about maximizing the experience. It's feeling that connection with the Almighty. Every time you walk in and out of your house, you have the ability to feel a relationship with God. Same with tefillin, phylacteries. It's the same with any mitzvah in the Torah. You can see it as a commandment. You can see it as a suggestion. Or you can see it as a relationship builder between you and the Almighty. You can see it as a tool, as a vessel through which your relationship with God, which is the greatest pleasure of all pleasures, say our sages, authentic pleasures, that is the vessel. The mitzvah is the vessel that will bring you to that pleasure. So, that is our Torah. Yeah, book of laws. Commandments. Suggestions. It's a book. This is the blueprint. If you want to understand existence, meaning, fulfillment, happiness, pleasure, the Torah is your book. Guidance, mentorship, direction. We'll talk more about this in a few minutes. Part number 2 is our book is the Torah. Right? Otherwise, some people refer to it as the Old Testament. I like to call it the Torah. Right? It's the Torah, and we'll see the different names that are given and what they mean. But just so that we know, and we lay down the framework, okay? There are, and you'll see this in your triangle. For those of you online who would like a copy of this, I'll happily send it to you. You have to email me, and I will happily email you a PDF of this. But here we have, up on top, we're going to talk about this in greater detail in the upcoming classes. But if you look in the green section here, this is the written law, the Torah Shebechtav. And that is 24 books. The 24 books are comprised of 5 books of the Torah, 8 books of the prophets, and 11 books of the writings. All right? And on the side over here, you have the list of every single one of those books that are in each of those categories. The Torah, the writings, and the prophets. The prophets and the writings. That's also known as Tanakh. And the Tanakh is an abbreviation of the first letters of the Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, right? And that's Tanakh. That's known as the written law. If you look at now at the aqua green section, we have the oral Torah, the oral law, known as Torah Sheba'al Peh. And there's a reason why it's called the oral Torah, not the rabbinic Torah. It's the oral Torah. Because, contrary to some who believe it is made up by rabbis, it is not made up by rabbis. As the Rambam writes, Moses had a notebook, and so did Joshua, and so did every one of the sages following them, where they took notes, and we'll see in a minute why it's important to have those notes, and why it's important for that not to be part of the written law, and instead to have an oral tradition. It's very important. Okay? But we have, as part of the oral law, we have the Midrash, the Kabbalah, which is comprised of the Zohar, and various different books of the Midrash. You see them here on the side. You have the Mishnah, and you have the Talmud, which has 2 parts of the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud and the Babylonian Talmud. We're going to get into this in greater detail. Okay, but this is just as for you to understand that we have the written Torah and the oral Torah. Okay? And then you have the summaries of this discussions in the oral Torah leads us to halacha. Halacha is how we actually observe. It's how we actually observe our day-to-day lives by the conclusions of those discussions and elaborations on each of the ideas mentioned. Now, I want to get into greater detail on that, but we'll have time later to do that. Right now, I want you to understand the difference between the written law and the oral law and why it's important for them to be together. Learn together. It is impossible to fulfill even one mitzvah in the Torah in the written Torah, without the oral Torah. Impossible. Okay? So you ask, what's the problem? So let's start. Circumcision. Right? What's the term used for circumcision? As in, which part of the body should be circumcised? Well, it uses a word that is found no place else in the Torah. So there's usually you'll have some reference. You'll be able to say, you know what, over there it's talking about a hand, over here it's talking about a hand, when you use the same language, right? But when you're using a word that has no other parallel, any place, it could mean anything. So how do we know that bris means a specific part of the body? Maybe it means an earlobe. Maybe it means the tip of the nose. Right? Maybe it means the chin. Maybe it means the elbow. Maybe you can pick any part of the body and say that's the part of the body that needs to be circumcised. Torah doesn't say where. The Torah just says, circumcise your boys on the 8th day. It doesn't tell you what to do. It doesn't even tell you. It tells you what to do. It doesn't tell you how to do. The details are missing. You have the mitzvah of mezuzah. We all know the mitzvah of mezuzah. Doesn't say what a mezuzah is. That's the only problem. It says put a mezuzah on your doorways. Right? But it doesn't say what it is. Right? It's just like me sending home a note with a child. Tomorrow bring your, make up a word to school. Parents are going to be like puzzled. What does that mean? Right? What is that? I don't know what that means. You're telling me put a mezuzah on the doorway. I don't know what a mezuzah is. And the Torah doesn't tell us what a mezuzah is. Torah tells us kosher animals, non-kosher animals, only eat the kosher animals. And when you eat those kosher animals, that has to be properly slaughtered. Okay. How do I do that? Do I take a taser? What do I do to slaughter it? It doesn't say how to slaughter it. Right? So we see, and again, we have 630 commandments. I can keep you busy here for 613 hours. Right? Going through each and every mitzvah and telling you how it really doesn't make any sense because we have no idea how to observe them. If we only follow the Torah, the words of the Torah, we don't know anything about how to observe them. Where do we learn how to observe them? From the oral Torah. And the oral Torah is, there are 3 times in the history where all the animals descended to one place. Right? The first was by Adam. By Adam, actually four times. Okay, the first was by Adam, where Adam had to give all the animals names. So the kangaroos had to come from Australia, I was to schlep all the way there to the Garden of Eden, right? So that Adam can give us names. Yes, all the animals to one place. The second time was Noah in the flood, where Noah had to put all the animals into the ark. So now all of the animals have to descend to one place. And then there's a disagreement whether or not all of the animals were. So we'll say a third opinion, right, which is an opinion that the third is in Egypt, when there was the plague of the wild beasts, all the animals came and tore apart the place. Everyone took care of their own responsibility of using their own skills and talents. The tigers and the lions were doing their share, and the crickets were doing their share, and the grasshoppers were doing obviously there's the plague of the grasshopper, but all the animals came and they descended upon Egypt. And then the other time the Torah tells us that all animals joined together in one place was when Moses was teaching the Jewish people about the laws of kosher. What is a kosher animal? What is not a kosher animal? Right? The Torah says that an animal that has split hooves. What is split hooves? I don't know. If I've never seen a split hoof, I can't tell you what a split hoof is. So Moses is telling him an animal with split hooves. What is it? Doesn't say. So all the animals came and he showed. This animal, yes. This animal, no. This animal, yes. This animal, no. This one is a tricky guy because he has split hooves, but he doesn't chew its cud. Anybody know what that is? The pig, right? Don't get persuaded. They stick out their hooves to show, look, I'm kosher. They're not, right? But how would we know if we didn't have a live example of that, right? Moses was not a zoologist. But the Torah, given by God, being the blueprint, right, knows God created all the animals. He'll tell you, yes, these are the exceptions to the rule, right? So, the written Torah, the written law, is what to do. The oral Torah is how to do. Now, if you look at this beautiful, magnificent library here, you will find so many books dedicated to how to do. How to do it. By the way, there's not only how to do in a practical, technical sense, but there's also a how to do with inspiration. What's the meaning behind it? We don't just do things. We're not puppets. God doesn't want puppets. God wants relationship. Every mitzvah is supposed to stir up within us an emotion, an excitement, an energy. God doesn't want us to be robots. Right? We have commandments. Yes, we have lots of commandments. Beautiful commandments. We have to connect to them. We have to understand. I'll tell you my own personal discovery in my own Judaism. Right? I grew up in a religious home, in a Torah observant home. And to me, the question about keeping kosher was never a question. I will never get a reward going to the world to come, right? They'll judge me and they'll say, hey, what did you do with your life? I'll say, me? I never ate a cheeseburger. What is wrong with you, right? Give me big kudos, right? Like, sorry, that's not, you're not getting any reward for that, right? From where you come from, that's not a challenge. You're not getting reward for that, right? But someone who grew up in that lifestyle, and then because of learning the Torah, or not because of learning the Torah, but ended up in a place where they said, you know what, this isn't good for my body, this isn't good for my soul, God doesn't want me to do this, right? And changed. They're getting eternity for that. Eternity. Right? So, we have, lost my train of thought here. Put me back on.
Can you give an example in your life?
Oh, my life, that's right. Thank you. So, what happened is that when I was about 15, 16, 17 years old, I suddenly realized, you know something? Shabbos I'm observing because I always observed it. And kosher I'm observing because I always observed it. And tzitzit I'm wearing every day because I always wore it. I never made the conscious decision to do it. And I don't want to be a puppet. I don't want to just do things. So I took it upon myself at that time to say, I'm not going to stop doing it, but I'm going to spend extra time every day investigating why we do it. And took out books and started learning and doing the research to understand the meaning behind it. So now I'm not only doing that mitzvah, but feeling a closeness with God in so doing. Right? So the mitzvahs are to be performed, but there's also an emotion, a connection that needs to go along with it. And that's Torah, written Torah, observance of Torah, oral Torah, excitement, energy of Torah. There needs to be a synergy between those. Okay? So, my recommendation to everyone here is that the Torah, you need to read it, you need to learn it, and you need to know it. It's not a New York Times magazine, right? You don't read the, it's funny. This morning, I dropped my son off at the airport. At 3:30, we left the house. His flight was 5:15. I know it's brutal. But you know what? I felt so much better when I saw the lines at TSA, right? And I'm like, I'm not the only crazy person flying that's taking some of the. And thank God my son had TSA Pre. He did, but I couldn't take him to the gate because I didn't. I was not going to wait 5 hours to go through the TSA line. So there are people like up at those hours. I can't believe it. But either way, on the way out, where I did the valet because I just had to run in, So they parked the car. When I came back, they gave me a newspaper, right? They gave me, I don't remember, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, one of the papers. So I looked at the cover, and that was it. I didn't even get into it. But usually you read a newspaper, you pick it up, you read it, you throw it out. It's done. It's history, right? The Torah is not a New York Times, right? It's not a USA Today. It's not a Wall Street Journal. It's not a book I read it. Oh, yeah, I read it, right? That's not what the Torah is. Because the Torah, at every level, means something different. Every time you grow, you elevate yourself, you have a whole different perspective of the Torah. You can find people, you ask them, so tell me, what do you know about Noah and the flood? Right? Noah and the ark. Now they'll tell you exactly what they learned when they were 6 years old in Hebrew school. And now they're not 6 years old. They're 46 years old. Or 56 years old. And in 50 years, nothing changed in that story. Well, maybe it's time for that, for all of us really to take some time to read it, learn it, and really know it. It's ours. It belongs to us. It belongs to every single one of us. It doesn't belong to the rabbis. You don't have to wait for the sermons. It's your own Torah. It belongs to you. And today we have such incredible resources in English and in Spanish as well, and in French, and in every language that you're interested in. Art Scroll is unbelievable in their literature that they're creating for the modern man and woman, of course, to learn and understand the Torah. And to learn and understand, it's on our fingertips today. Literally, you have podcasts by the thousands explaining Torah, explaining Mishnah. Hopefully this class will also be a podcast. You'll be able to review this again, right? Hopefully it works. Now, learn it, and read it, and know it, and review it, and review it, and review it, and I promise you, this is a guarantee or your money back. Every time you read it, you will learn something else. Every time you look at it, you'll be like, how come I never noticed that? Right? How come I never noticed the juxtaposition of these verses? How come I never understood the punctuation of these changes the whole understanding? Right? You could put the comma after a different word and suddenly it's a different verse. Right? It's an amazing experience to learn Torah and to delve into every single word of the Torah. It's just it's breathtaking. There's nothing more exhilarating than studying Torah. And that's a guarantee. More than skydiving and bungee jumping and whatever else that people do that gives them a thrill. You delve into a line of Talmud. It's greater than zip lining and greater than Amazon. Okay? So, we have to understand something else, is that there are 4 different layers of understanding the Torah. All right? God placed secret gems in every single letter of the Torah, in every single verse of the Torah. So we continue to learn, connect, and continuously grow like an orchard. Now, if you take the word orchard, it's 4 letters in Hebrew. Anybody know the Hebrew word for orchard? Pardes. Very good. Pardes. Pei, Resh, Dalet, and Samach. Pei is for pshat. Pshat means the simplest literal meaning based on the text and the context. The second level is Resh, Remez. Remez is the hints and allusions that are contained within the Torah. One of the methodologies are gematria, numerology, right? The numerical value of a letter, of each letter of the alphabet, of the Hebrew alphabet. So there are many times there are hints within the word that teach you so much just from the numerology. That's one of the, again, it's a hint. It's hinted in the words. You have to know. It's like sometimes there's certain things you can't see unless you have glasses. You know, we just had the eclipse, right? And those of you who were fortunate to see this unbelievable gift from the Almighty, right? It's just remarkable. And my children and I were so fortunate to be exactly in the place. We were driving from New York back to Texas. It was the end of the summer. And everyone was saying that the exact perfect center of where the eclipse would be in, I'm trying to remember the name of the place now. It's someplace in Tennessee. Knoxville. Not Knoxville, next to Knoxville. This is exactly this is exactly where we were. We just kept on driving. And as soon as it ends, we'll pull over. Exactly where we were. It was remarkable. But you know something? If you looked with your eye, you wouldn't be able to see anything. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't notice it. But as soon as you took those glasses and put them on, suddenly you saw exactly what you needed to see, and it was amazing. The naked eye can't see it, right? To see the hidden secrets in the Torah, you need to have a different shade, a different perspective. Sometimes you need to have a teacher to teach you how to learn a certain way, how to think a certain way. You know, one of the things that we learned as yeshiva students, my rabbi would give out, we would learn a page of Talmud, and the rabbi would say, okay, so we're learning from this line to this line today, and he would give us all the sources, Rashi and Tosafot, right? Rashi, the commentary on the inner side of the page, the Tosafot on the outer side of the page commentary, and in the back in the Maharsha, right? Look at this, it would tell you exactly where to begin, where to end, and then in this commentary, that commentary, you'd go around from all of these different commentaries. And the question is, why is he giving us all these different sources? Right? I understand what he says. And the reason is because we studied through those sources and we're trying to get an understanding as to how he's thinking. We need to learn how to think like a Torah scholar. We need to learn how to think like a sage. And that's what these classes were for us. It's giving us a new way to think. Okay? Remez is one of those. You have to be trained, you have to learn, you have to be inquisitive. And, of course, we have hundreds and hundreds of commentaries on the Torah, as you can find here, right? Pulling out those secrets, pulling out those hints from each letter, from each word, and from each verse. The third level is drush for the Dalet, and that's the moral and philosophical derivations. So there are things that we learn from how they acted, things from the stories, the storyline, things behind what's on the surface. And then we have sod, and sod is for the samach, the fourth letter, and that is the hidden meanings and mystical secrets. And that, again, most of these are right here in the oral law, right? You have the Midrash, that's level 3. You have the Kabbalah, which is level 4, the deepest, right? You have the Mishnah, which is really dealing with level 1, just understanding what the Torah is telling us. So it is critical for us not to segment the Torah into, I'll just tell you quickly. We have to know, you know what? I'll get to it. I'm going to follow my notes. I'm going to get to it in a minute, okay? I'm sorry. So, I'm going all over the place. I told you I'm excited. Right? So, that is our book, the Torah. It's called the Tree of Life. Now we're going to talk about the names of the Torah. Anybody know any names of the Torah? What do we call the Torah? So number 1 is, I gave it away, Torah, right? What are the other names?
Bible.
Right. There's a... Well, we have another which is called the Chumash. All right, and another which is in I believe it's Greek, Pentateuch, right? So now if you look over here, right? So you have over here the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, which is otherwise known as the Chumash. Chumash, anybody know what that word rhymes with? Chamesh. Chamesh is 5. Why 5? 5 books in the Torah. So it's the Chumash, it's the Chamesh. Okay? And then you have over here the Pentateuch, and each one of these names signifies something. So the Torah means teacher. Torah means teaching. Torah means instruction. Torah also means a scribe. Torah means law. The Torah has many, many different translations. They all are correct interpretations of what the Torah is. The Chumash, again, like we said, is 5. It's talking about the 5 books of the Torah. If someone's saying Chumash, they're usually referring to one of the 5 books of Moses. Okay? Tanakh is all 24 books, like we mentioned before, that fall into the category of the written law. And then you have the Pentateuch, which is from the Greek word 5 scrolls. Right? 5 is penta, right? You have 5, and that's like the pentagon, right? It has 5, right? So that's the Pentateuch, and that's just important for us to know what the names are, so we can, where's my Chumash? We can use that like, oh, Chumash. Okay, so now I want to talk. This is very important. This part, and that is, what are the themes of the Torah? What are the themes of the Torah? So, I've never watched Star Wars, okay, but I was listening to some random radio in the car, and they were talking about, I think it was just this morning or yesterday, and they're talking about, okay, if you were introducing someone to Star Wars, what would you tell them to watch? They're like, oh, tell them to watch the 3rd thing, and then the 4th, and then the 2nd, and then the 1st, and then the this, and then that. I have never watched this. I don't know what they're talking about, right? But when you talk about the Torah, lahavdil, not to compare between unholy and holy, right? The holy, right? This the Torah. This is the blueprint of the world. We see a theme throughout the Torah. Are there any themes that you've recognized in any of your learning of the Torah? Anybody? Morality. Okay.
The way of life.
What's that?
Kedusha.
Holiness. Very good.
The way of life.
A way of life.
Relationship.
Relationships.
Redemption.
Redemption. Yeah. Good and evil. So I'll tell you the ones that I came up with, and I think all of yours that you said are correct and are accurate. And I want you to continue to learn and find new themes. But these are the themes that I came up with from my own learning. Okay, number 1, free will. Right? It's the most fundamental principle in the Torah. God tells Adam, right? Don't eat from the tree. From this tree, don't eat. Now, God didn't tie up his hands, and God didn't put a do not cross yellow, string around it. God just told him don't. And now he has his free will, whether or not he will or he will not. Whether he will obey or disobey. Right? Free will is one of the most fundamental themes in the Torah. It's one of the most fundamental principles in our life. We have free will. And we can choose right or wrong. We can choose whatever we want. We have the power to choose. Okay? It's a fundamental theme in the Torah. You see this throughout. You see this just 2 weeks ago. We were talking about Yosef. Yosef was trying to, his master's wife, or I don't know how you would call her, his master, the wife of his master was trying to seduce Joseph. So what does Joseph do? He has free will. Yes or no? That's his decision. Right? There's no one else there for him. And that's one thing I think a very important theme for us to teach ourselves and to teach our children. Yeah, you have free will, but you are accountable for your decisions. And that's number 2. And that is reward and punishment. Reward and punishment is, straight through every single story in the Torah. we have reward and punishment. And the reward and punishment is based on the level of each individual. So you have Abraham. Do you know that Abraham was punished? Abraham was the paragon of kindness. He was the example of what it means to welcome guests into your home, what it means to do acts of kindness. And here he sees he's ill. On the third day after his circumcision, God is visiting him, doing what we know as the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. We learned that from God, by the way. When you go visit someone who's sick, you're doing the act that God did himself. He didn't send a messenger. He didn't send anybody. God himself goes to visit Abraham. And then Abraham sees 3 passers-by. So he says, God, how do you say 1 second? Right? Un minuto, right? 1 second, right? Just 1 second. You say that to God? He says, yeah. What do you mean? I have guests. I got to bring those guests in. I got to feed them. I got to give them water to wash themselves. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And somewhere in that story, if you remember, Abraham, there's one thing that Abraham gives over to someone else to do for him. He asks his servant, bring some water for these guests. Bring some water for these guests. Abraham, the image of kindness, the image of hospitality, he should have known better. You should bring the water yourself. So you know what the punishment is? Your descendants are going to be in the desert, and they're going to be thirsty. I'm not going to give them a river. I'm not going to give them a lake. They're going to have to get water from the stone. They get it from my messenger. Our sages tell us that was the punishment for Abraham not doing the mitzvah which he should have done himself. Wow. But he did it. What does it make a difference? At the end of the day, the guests got what they wanted. They got what they needed. They got the water. But for who Abraham was, at the level that he was at, that's something you shouldn't pass on to someone else. You should have done it yourself. You did it through a messenger. I'm going to give your children through a messenger, and that's going to be your punishment. So simple and so delicate. Reward and punishment. Right? Look at we bless our children. Right? Why do we bless our children the way we do? What is it? Just in last week's portion, we read, Yisimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'che Menashe. Do anybody know why we say those words? God should make you like Menashe and Ephraim, or Ephraim and Menashe. Why do we use those? We should be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No. Like Ephraim and Menashe. You know why? Because they are the example of what it means to grow up in exile. They grew up in Egypt. They grew up with nothing, and yet they persevered. They kept their relationship with God. They didn't compromise. There's a reward for that. The Jewish people will be in exile. They'll be out in Houston, Texas. They'll be in South America. They'll be in Canada, Nebuch, right? They'll be all over the world. Why do people live in Canada? It's so freezing cold, right? Okay, but either way, they'll be all over the world. They'll always bless their children. They should be like Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim and Menashe were able to sustain themselves, their spiritual state, even though they were out in Egypt, alone, with nothing. There's a reward for that. That forever they will be remembered. And the blessing that we will bless our children will also be in their name. It's a reward. And we can go through every single page of the Torah and find examples of reward and punishment. It's just delicious. All right? Reward and punishment. Next, I want to ask a question. Anybody here have a need for speed when they drive? Jay, you look like the type, right? All right, so Jay is driving on the road, and he's driving at 95 miles an hour, and it's not that one next to Austin that's 85 miles an hour speed limit, right? All right, he's driving over here on the 610, 95 miles an hour. Cop pulls him over, brings 3 other units behind him, and they want to check his car. He's driving 95 miles an hour. He's like, guys, what's the problem? Right? And Jay says, you know something? There's a law, and the law is that there needs to be a speed limit sign on every entrance to the highway. You'll notice every time there's a merge from cars off the highway coming onto the highway, there needs to be a speed limit sign. And every certain amount of distance, there needs to be a speed limit reminder. Now, what's if there isn't? You can go to the judge and say, listen, it's not fair. I wasn't warned. Right? We all understand that if your child or grandchild takes that candy from the candy jar, and you didn't tell them not to take it, you can't punish them for taking. Right? You have to warn them. We know it's a very basic principle. If you don't warn, you can't punish. If you don't warn, you can't punish. If you don't warn, you can't punish. So I don't understand. The Torah was actually given, right, in year 2448 from creation of Adam. In those 2448 years, we see multiple stories of people getting punishment for things they were never warned about. Right? We have Noah's generation, we have the Tower of Babel, we have, you name it, you have the stories, you'll see it when you review the Chumash again, and when you learn it, and when you know it, and you'll see so many stories. And the question is, they were never warned. How can you punish someone if there was no warning?
Because it was on their hearts.
Our sages tell us, you know it, you're good. Our sages tell us, the Torah doesn't tell you common sense. That you have a special gift. It's called the brain. All right? The Torah doesn't tell you any mitzvah that is common sense. Excuse me, Rabbi, on the sheet you just gave me, right, there is a commandment which is common sense, and that is do not murder. Right? We all agree? Do not murder, common sense? So why does the Torah tell us do not murder? If you just said do not murder, that the Torah doesn't tell us anything that's common sense, why does the Torah tell something which is so obvious? Everybody knows it. So if you look, very interestingly, if you look at the commentaries on the Ten Commandments, the commentaries explain, you know what do not murder means? Not don't take a knife and stab someone. Don't take a gun and kill and murder someone. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about not embarrassing someone in public. That's a different type of murder. The obvious murder, the Torah doesn't need to tell you that. That's common sense. Thou shalt not steal. That's referring to a very different type of stealing than going into someone's pocket and taking out their iPhone. That's obvious. The Torah doesn't need to tell you that. The Torah is telling you a different type of stealing. Stealing someone's thoughts. Stealing someone's intelligence. So the Torah doesn't tell you common sense. That you have a brain for. That's another theme in the Torah. Now, the Torah is not telling us stories. The Torah is not telling us stories. And whenever you learn the Torah, whenever you read the Torah, what you need to do, and what we all need to do, is to take this seemingly regular story, ordinary story, and see how this story is a life lesson. You take the story of Isaac, you take the story of the brothers, the tribes, right? Selling Joseph. You take the story of Pharaoh. You take the story. Any story that you see in the Torah is not a story. It's a life lesson. It's telling you something. Now, it's not only a life lesson. It's a prophecy. It's a prophecy. In fact, one of the great sages who lived only 200 years ago, said that every name of every person living is in the Torah. And every person who's ever existed. So I will just tell you my father's name appearing in the Torah. Okay? It's incredible. Now my father, his name is the name of our first patriarch. Right? You're not supposed to repeat your father's name, right? So my father's name is, anybody know the first patriarch? That's correct. Abraham. And our last name is Wolbe or Wolbe, right? Because there's no W in Hebrew, right? Even though it's spelled in English and in German, where it originates from, it was with the W, but it's Vav, Vav, Lamed, Bet, He. So in the Hamalach HaGoel, in last week's Torah portion, Vayikra, so we say, Hamalach HaGoel Otimi Kalra, Yivarech et hanarim v'yikareh behem shmi. I'll read to you the English translation. B'shem avotai, Avraham v'Yitzchak v'yidgu larov b'kerev haaretz. So let me read to you what that means first in English in correct translation, and then I will point out the exact letters that are my father's name. Okay? I'm still looking for my name. But it's there. Okay. The angel who redeems me from all evil, may he bless the lads, and there shall be declared upon them my name and the names of my forefathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they proliferate like fish to abundance within the land. So we take Avraham, which is my father's name. Now you take the first letters of the following 5 words. V'Yitzchak, Vav, V'Yidgu, Vav, Larov, Lamed, Bikerev, Bet, Haaretz. Hey, that's my last name. All right? Vav, Vav, Lamed, Bet, Hey. You have it right there. So there's my father's name right in the Torah. Right? It's an amazing little insight. I challenge you to find your name in the Torah. Right? Search. Get started. Okay? Yes?
There was this other thing that I was thinking about. Not only it like also has all the blueprint involved in like life too, like with the proteins and stuff like that. If you are able to have like the Hebrew letters in a certain way, and you can have the different proteins,
right?
And
So,
they combine, and then you can make the different life forms.
So it's interesting that it says that when Moses was ascending the mountain to receive the Torah, and we're going to get into the details. Okay, I have an exact timeline for you. All right, so hopefully next week we're going to start with Genesis. We're going to start with the first portion, and I have a magnificent outline of each of the 5 books of the Torah. I will be happy to give it to you next week. I don't have any copies here with me, aside from my own. And here is all of the book of Genesis, right? Each portion, and the details of each of the details of that, each of the details that are written in that portion. It gives a timeline along over here. It gives the overall, the life of Abraham, the life of Isaac, the life of Jacob, Joseph and his brothers, how many portions, how many chapters, how many verses, just the general themes of every single portion and each book of the Torah. After that, we also have the Torah by the numbers. So we have all of the different numbers. I also prepared something which I don't have with me, which is all the mitzvahs that are in each of the portions. So you go through each portion, how many mitzvahs are there. It's really an incredible collection. I've been working on this for several years, and I'm happy every year that we do this program to offer something new to it. But one of the things that we have here is the exact timeline of the giving of the Torah. Exactly what part of the Torah was given in what location and what date it was given at. All right? So we have the time period, right? So we have 15 days prior to the Exodus, which was the first day of Nisan in Egypt, the first mitzvahs, the Jewish calendar, Pesach for generations, right? They got to tell a binchu, you should tell it to your children, right? Holidays, and the firstborn. is all given 15 days before the Exodus. 10 days after leaving the Exodus, on the 25th day of Nisan. And it goes through it's a beautiful timeline. I'm looking forward to sharing that with everyone. But let's just close it in over here. Prophecy, we said. In the storyline of the Torah is prophecy for future generations. The most incredible stories that we find, whether it be an election, whether it be someone doing something incredible or a terrible tragedy, God forbid, happening, you look in that week's Torah portion and you find it embedded in there. And it's very hard to know future prophecies, but it's very usually pretty simple to find it after the fact. You just look for certain information that of something that has happened, and you're able to find it in the Torah, in that week's portion. Okay, it's unbelievable, right? The foundation of Jewish life, the future history is mapped out through the Chumash. Okay, it's timeless. Torah isn't a book that isn't going to be relevant in 20 years. You take a novel, right? You take any book that's written by any human being, and it could be with an expiration date. It's not relevant. What they were dealing with in the early 1900s. I can give you books on the economics then. Excuse me. I can give you on economics. I can give you on politics. I can give you on war. Right? Once they had fighter jets, all those books on war are over. Right? Once they created the internet, all of the books on information sharing is over. Right? All of these things with the evolution of revelation, okay, there is no, there's never been a discovery in the history of the world, right? There's never been a discovery of a new invention or we can invent with things that are already here. I'll give you an example, okay? You're looking at me like, what is he talking about? Waves. Right. Today we use the waves for Wi-Fi. We use the waves for radio, for telephone. Right. Television.
To cut things away.
Right. We usually. Now, did that suddenly come in the 18th century? 19th century? Oh, it was always there. But there are things that God allows us to discover at a certain time. Guess what? Moses at Mount Sinai had waves too. It may not have been discovered then. Or it may have, and they put it away. They said it's no good. Right? It's not doing any good for anybody. Imagine if people were able to have, smartphones. Right? Who would want to listen to the Torah? Right? It's a challenge today as well, by the way. Right? It's damaging our ability to focus. It's damaging. But either way, the Torah is timeless. It is the best-selling book by far in the history of the world. Okay? And God forever guides His creation. So you see in the Torah, God, and this is obviously to negate those theories that God created the world and said, bye, I'm out on a coffee break for the next 1,000 years. I'll check up on you later, right? God is involved in every single detail of every single creation, of every single human, of every single world of event. God is involved in every single detail. We see that also in the Torah. Okay? Now, I think it's important for us to also, when we discuss the Torah and we look at the themes of the Torah, is to see who is the author and who he chooses to focus on. So obviously the author is God. What does God focus on? Who does God focus on? So God doesn't focus on the fish. God doesn't focus on the evil people. God focuses on the good people. Right? On the righteous people. Why? Well, generally, you write about the things you like. Right? Right? I won't write a book about botany. Okay? I love flowers, but that's not my passion. It's a beautiful creation of the Almighty, but that's not where my passion lies. I'm not going to write about something I'm not interested in. Right? But when you have an interest in something, as in good, as in relationship, that's what you write about. God loves us. God loves His creation. And God loves those who invest their time in that relationship. So, us being creations of God, God says, I'm going to put you into this world. I'm going to give you opportunity. I'm going to give you talent. I'm going to give you skills. I'm going to give you abilities. And now go get them. I want you to find me in the world, and I want you to glorify my name. I want you to sanctify my name. I want you to spread the name, the word of God to the world. That's the challenge that we have. That's the task at hand for every single Jew. That is the task we have. That is the responsibility that we have. And we see those who focused on it. Abraham. Right? What did Abraham do? He had a whole outreach organization. Right? This organization, Torch, should be Abraham 2.0. Right? Yeah. That's really what he says, let's get God into the world. How do we do that? Let's teach people about God. Let's be God-like. Let's try to emulate God. And people will ask. It says that Abraham would invite guests into his home, and when the guests would get up to leave, he'd say, whoa, 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 whoa. You got to pay for the meal. Like, what? Imagine you're a guest and someone invites you to their house. They say, okay, Susan, I want you to come for dinner. All right? We're inviting you guys for dinner. You come for dinner, and right, you're ready to leave. Oh, thank you so much. It was really delicious. And they're like, you got to pay for this dinner. You're like, awkward, right? It's like, imagine, it's like, this is not right. That's what Abraham would do. He's like, no. They'd start pulling out their wallet, humming and hawing, right? He's like, no. You don't understand. He says, where did this food come from? Like, what do you mean? From you, from your kitchen. He's like, no! What's wrong with you? There's a creator! He gives it to us. We put a seed, it plants a tree, and a tree grows. Do you think that's us? What do we have to do with it? There's a God. God? What are you talking about? Let me explain to you. And then he would say, we have to thank God. That's your payment. You thank God. Second, I like this God. Right? And that's how Abraham and Sarah brought with them the masses to connect with monotheism, with one God, serving a power that's above us, a power that's giving, not giving to ourselves, giving to a higher power, to the Almighty. So that's another theme that we'll find throughout the Torah. And that is, God chooses to focus on the righteous. Right? We said it's a unique book, and every level of understanding will find its unique specialty of understanding for that age. My little son is 5 years old. And you know what? When he comes home every week from school, it's remarkable the stories that he understands for a 5-year-old. And then my son, who's a 7-year-old, can add a few tidbits to that. And then my daughter, who is a 10-year-old, adds a few tidbits to that, because everyone at their age can understand a whole different depth to it, and so on and so forth. So we have to, it's layers and layers and layers and layers of understanding. Okay. Now, this is the most important part of everything we said about the theme of the Torah. Accuracy of information. Okay? Accuracy of information. How do I know that it's a God-given document? Now, I want to tell you a story. A friend of mine called me one day and he said, I was asked to do a special program about American law and Jewish law, and to compare between the two. Would you be available to help me? I said, sure, anytime. Let me know. Call me. I'll be available 24 hours a day. You tell me I want to help. Okay. I didn't hear anything. few months later, I get a phone call at 11 o'clock at night from this individual. He says, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm home." "Is there anything I can do to help you?" He says, "Well, I'm about to start my course tomorrow, and I don't know what in the world I'm talking about." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, I sat with 3 different rabbis, and I asked them one simple question. Who wrote the Torah?" And he says, "You wouldn't believe that I got 3 different answers. And I'm sad to tell you, none of them were right. Not one." Who wrote the Torah? I said to him, "Can you tell me?" I went to his house. I stayed at his house till about 4 in the morning. Worked through this chart with him. This exact chart. And we went through exactly, detail by detail, in the Torah, pulling it out. I said, "But before we do that, when they pick up the Torah in synagogue and they do Hagbah, they sing a song, right? Vezot HaTorah Asher Samoshe, right? I said, let me sing it, let me hear it, right? And I'm saying, do you know the words you're saying? I said, and this is the Torah, right, that was written by Moses through the Word of God. I'm not making this up. This is what you sing in your synagogue, and I sing in my synagogue, and in every synagogue across the globe. Right? The Torah was written by Moses through the Word of God. And I'll give you proof to it. Okay? Moses, we spoke about this in one of the classes 3 weeks ago. Moses, in the book of Numbers, there's almost an entire portion that is dedicated to speak about those who tried to curse the Jewish people. Balak and Bilam. There's a whole portion dedicated to it. And you wonder, these people are evil haters of the Jews. So imagine you're Moses. You're sitting and writing the Torah, you're talking about the Jewish people in the desert, and this happened, and that happened, you counted the tribes, and this and that, and God says, and while you were busy with the Jewish people, let me tell you the rest of the story. Bilam and Balak were trying to curse the Jewish people, and I told them, you can't curse them. Does Moses know anything about that? He wasn't even there. Moses is down in the desert. These guys are looking from the top of a mountain. They're looking down on the Jewish people. Oh, we hate those Jews. And God protects us from that whole catastrophe that would have happened had those curses been placed on the Jews. How did Moses even know about it? Moses wasn't there. How can Moses write about things that were 1,000 years before him? Or 2,000 years before him? And there's pieces of information that are placed constantly throughout the Torah that it's impossible for him to know on his own, if not for God giving those words. For example, we have the promise that one who goes up to the temple, right? 3 times there's a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Jewish people from all around the world would all descend on Jerusalem. Why? It was special offerings, and it's a special time to be close to God. In God's sort of physical space, the temple. That's the remaining wall of that is the western wall. It's most so precious to us. The Jewish people would have this pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So what would happen? Imagine this, okay? Suddenly, all of Houston gets on a plane, and they all go to Jerusalem. Who's going to have a field day while we're gone? The looters. Right? They know, okay, Meyerland, right? You come back, it's not a flood. It's looters, right? They took everything. Right? You come back. Why? Because everybody knows Passover, they're all going to Israel. And the people from the Golan Heights, The same thing. They're going to Jerusalem. And the people from Beersheba, they're going to Jerusalem. And the people from all the other parts of the world, they're going to Jerusalem. So just look out for your Jewish neighbors and rob them silly. What does God say? You come to visit me, I protect your homes. Now, Moses is a great man. But Moses can't make such a promise, with all due respect. He cannot make such a promise. Only God can make such a promise. You know, God tells us to rest on the sabbatical year. 7th year, don't work your land in the land of Israel. Rest. But the way it works is if you don't plant the field, it's not going to grow. Right? So any farmer is going to say to himself, I'm not listening, and I'm going to plant my fields. So God says, you know what? I'll give you a promise. If you don't work on the 7th year, I will give you a triple crop on the 6th year. For the 6th year, for the 7th year, and for the 8th year, till you get your act together and start planting, which will first grow your first crops in the 9th year. Can Moses make this promise? Moses never stepped foot in the land. The most he was able to do was see. So how can he make such a promise? Moses can't. God can. And only God can. No human being can make such promises. And if you look in the Torah, you will find many more examples of it just doesn't make any sense that Moses himself could write such a thing. He can't. He couldn't write one word without God telling him to do so. All right? So, accuracy of the Torah is critical. Because otherwise, if it's not accurate, then anyone can make up whatever they want. Right? I can make up new laws, I can make up new rules, but that's not the way it works. And we'll see this. We're going to go through this pyramid. Next week, we're going to go through this in greater detail to understand that you can't make up things. Rabbis don't have authority to make up laws. They don't have the authority to make up rules. I know it's been promulgated around that, the rabbis made up those rules. The rabbis can't do such a thing. They don't have the power to just make up rules. Okay? There are circumstances that we need to talk about. There has to be universal acceptance of things. It's not a simple process. What's easily put as like, the rabbis just want to make our lives miserable. That's the oral law. No, God forbid. Okay? So, there's a clear transmission. The word of God through the hand of Moses. It was dictated by God, and every single letter that is supposed to be in the Torah is in the Torah. And if it was not supposed to be in the Torah, it's not. Right? All Torah scrolls must be written from an existing scroll. You take a Torah scroll here in Houston, Texas. You take a Torah scroll in Mexico City. You take a Torah scroll in Toronto, Canada, and you go to Argentina and South Africa and Yemen and Jerusalem and Iran and even England. Right? Every single Torah scroll is exactly the same. Not an extra letter and not an omitted letter. Every Torah scroll must be written from an existing Torah scroll. You make a mistake in the Torah, it's not allowed to be used. It's not kosher. You can't use a Torah scroll. If they're in the middle of reading the Torah and there's a mistake there, they have to roll it up right there, put it away, and they can't use it till it gets fixed. All right? And then the accuracy of every letter. There are 304,805 letters in the Torah. Not one extra letter and not one omitted letter in every Torah scroll. Okay? Now, we're way over time, so we're going to stop here, and we're going to continue next week, hopefully exactly where we left off. So just stay right there. I look forward to seeing you all next week. And tomorrow night is Partners in Torah. Again, looking forward to seeing everyone there. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed. Before you leave, we have a sign-in sheet here. If everyone can please sign in before you leave so that I can send reminders for next week. Oh, here's a pen. You right here?
Yep. Thank you.
And again, this course is free. I want you to enjoy. This is a sampling of what we do throughout the year on Tuesday nights, where we have in-depth history classes and then in-depth Torah study, learning through the verses, the commentaries. So thank you very much for joining us. To our friends online, when you get home, don't forget to like and share these videos so that other people can enjoy them, hopefully.
You got another one, please?
Sure, absolutely. And again, any of our friends out there who want a copy of this, I'll be happy to email you a copy, or if you'd like, you can come to the Torch Center and get your own free copy. So, have a good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us.